In the headlines tonight, will the two rival parties break the deadlock is yet again the energy-draining question. Parliament begins its regular session today after ending the past two extraordinary sessions without a deal over the so-called ferry bill. North Korea makes clear its intention to carry out provocations by firing off another short-range missile on this Monday. This as Washington says its North Korea policy remains unchanged. And U.S. senators call for sending weapons to help Ukraine fight against what they call a Russian invasion. This after Russia's president calls for a statehood of eastern and southern Ukraine. These stories and more coming right up on Early Edition at 6. It's 6 in the evening on Monday, September 1st here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Laah Hyun-kyung.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us. The National Assembly opened a regular parliamentary session this Monday with a dark cloud hanging over its head.
That's right. They have a long list of bills to pass, not to mention a budget review, but the rival parties will not get out of first gear until they pass a much contested bill on April's ferry tragedy.
Our National Assembly correspondent Ji Myung-kil starts us off.
Some 300 lawmakers gathered Monday to open their regular parliamentary session and first plenary session. The Assembly Speaker used the opportunity to urge lawmakers to regain the people's trust and carry out their legislative duties.
We must put an end to the Sewol-ho ferry bill standstill. The rival parties should yield more and seek understand. We must focus on reviving the economy to improve the livelihoods of the people and on improving relations between South and North Korea.
Over the next 100 days, the National Assembly is tasked with passing next year's spending budget and a set of economic stimulus and anti-corruption bills, as well as conducting the annual parliamentary audit on the government.
The regular parliamentary session must meet the needs of the people. We must work on next year's budget plans and pass bills related to improving the livelihoods of the people.
But before that can happen, the rival parties will have to resolve a month-long deadlock over a bill designed to uncover the causes of April's ferry accident. Extraordinary sessions were held in July and August, but not a single bill was passed amid the bipartisan wrangling.
The Plenary Party and the victims' families must reach a compromise over the Sewol-ho ferry bill. The New Politics Alliance for Democracy has been persistent in its efforts to enact it.
In attempts to break the impasse, Plenary Party floor leader Lee Won-gu held third round of talks with the victims' families on Monday, but they failed to reach an agreement. And with Korea's Chuseok holiday coming next week, the rival parties are under even more pressure to make progress in the coming days. Ji Myung-kil, Arirang News.
And on to the latest from North Korea. The regime reinforced the notion this morning that it will not hesitate to carry out provocations without notice. Pyongyang fired off another short-range projectile into the East Sea earlier on this Monday. An official at South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff says it had a range of around 220 kilometers and that no prior warning was given. The South Korean official adds it marks the first time the regime has fired a short-range projectile from its northwestern province of Chagangdo, that's just 60 kilometers from its border with China. In recent South Korean media reports of a U.S. official making a trip to Pyongyang have many wondering if Washington has changed its North Korea policy. The White House says no, but could there be subtle signs of a slight shift? Our Choi Yoo-sun has more.
Washington is sticking with its policy of not engaging with North Korea just for the sake of holding talks. In a written statement to South Korea's Yonhap News, National Security Council spokesperson Patrick Van Trell said the U.S. is open to dialogue with the North, but will decide on re-engaging with the regime based on its actions and not words. By actions, the spokesperson said Pyongyang would need to show it's sincere about ending its nuclear weapons development and that it's ready to fulfill past commitments. Unconfirmed reports of an informal meeting between U.S. and North Korean officials in Pyongyang and the North Korean foreign minister's attendance at the UN General Assembly later this month have fueled speculation of renewed dialogue between the two sides. There's something to make out of Washington's statement, especially as it comes after its informal civilian meeting with North Koreans in May. The Obama administration may have decided to maintain its North Korea policy following that contact. On the other hand, the NSC spokesperson urging the North to use a New York-based channel instead of civilian routes to communicate with the U.S. deserves some attention. Washington's soon-to-be-appointed six-party talks envoy Sidney Seiler, the post in charge of the New York channel, could seek to better utilize it. The Obama administration can certainly make use of that channel to control North Korea's provocative behavior ahead of midterm elections in November. And the three Americans detained in the North, widely speculated to have been the purpose of the reported trip to Pyongyang by an American official, could force the U.S. to seek negotiations. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
And all this comes while Pyongyang hosts a pro wrestling event over the weekend. Foreign sports stars and loud cheers were seen and heard in the capital. North Korea watchers say the event may improve bilateral ties between Pyongyang and Tokyo. Here's our Son Jung-in with more.
The crowd cheers as renowned names from the wrestling world like Bob Sapp and Jerome Le Banner take to the ring. The last time Pyongyang hosted a pro wrestling competition like this was in April 1995. Foreign media reported on the event taking a greater interest in the changes they have noticed in the state, such as its developed infrastructure and increasingly savvy spectators.
This is the first time I've watched such an event. It was very impressive. I hope these friendly games take place more often for the sake of unity.
Some American visitors were in attendance, including Pras Michel, who co-founded the hip-hop group The Fugees.
The infrastructure seemed really good for a third world country. You know,
at least what we're allowed to see.
Right. Well, yeah. Exactly.
With guests like Pras Michel, who is a friend of U.S. President Barack Obama, some speculate it was North Korea's move to improve its international relations, but experts view it as an ordinary sports diplomacy event that Pyongyang has been holding for a long time.
The move is seen as North Korea's way to show that its young leader is active and friendly to the people by hosting athletic events.
In line with the competition, Antonio Inoki, a Japanese wrestler turned lawmaker who co-hosted the event, met with North Korea's ceremonial head of state Kim Young-nam over the weekend. They are believed to have exchanged views on Japanese nationals who were abducted by North Korean agents in the 1970s and 80s. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
We have two green stories. First one is more positive than the next one. In order to make the nation more eco-friendly and carbon-free, one of the things needed in the future will be more EVs or electric vehicles.
That's right, and experts say in order to see more EVs on the roads, the costs need to be cut from somewhere. Our Hwang Ji-hye has this week's Industry Insight.
Electric cars are still too pricey compared to their counterparts relying on combustion engines that few want to buy one. The key to slashing the price and luring more consumers to this emission-free auto market is cutting the costs of the battery, which accounts for 40% of the car's total price. So could the electric car era hit anytime soon? Take a look. By 2020, more than 10 million eco-friendly vehicles powered by batteries are expected to be on the roads. And this industry of tomorrow is taking root here in Korea with a couple of local companies spearheading the global electric car battery market. Korean makers LG Chem and Samsung SDI are expected to make up half the electric car battery market share this year. LG Chem recently won a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars from Audi, raising the number of its global customers to 20. They include General Motors, Ford, Renault, and Hyundai. Samsung SDI supplies batteries to BMW. Japan was the pioneer for electric car batteries, but experts say Korean firms are better positioned at this point.
The competitive edge of local battery makers has strengthened since developing batteries for mobile phones and other home appliances. Based on that, they're now building up their technology for batteries in electric and hybrid vehicles.
Battery life is not necessarily the main stumbling block anymore. Companies already have the technology to develop a battery that can run around 320 kilometers on a single charge, more than enough for a normal daily drive for most commuters. But the key in building a big enough electric car market is driving down the price. So the name of the game is to secure a system of mass production, and little wonder battery makers are vying to strike deals with as many automakers as possible as their customers.
The electric car market is still in its early stages, so once battery makers establish business relationships with automakers, it's likely to continue for decades. It's important to secure deals, although they might face losses for now.
The race to win more customers is heating up. The biggest competitor, Panasonic, has teamed up with American electric car maker Tesla to build a massive battery factory in the U.S. It's a big leap by the Japanese battery maker, and the fierce rivalry should ensure the era of electric cars will come sooner than we ever thought possible. Hwang Ji, Arirang News.
Face a one-day entry ban. 77.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Laah Hyun-kyung and Daniel Choy.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
And on to our second green story, as you put it, Daniel. Farmers in the southern part of the country had to fend off billions of locusts in their fields last week, a major concern as they prep for the upcoming Korean Thanksgiving holiday.
Well, thankfully, the situation is now under control, but scientists do warn that a repeat appearance is not out of the question. Here's our Kwon So-ah with more.
Locust attack. Fields of reeds and crops in Korea's southern Jeollanam-do province have been stripped by swarms of bugs. But thankfully, the worst is thought to be over now. Officials say pest control successfully eradicated the infestations over the weekend.
It took 2 days to find an environmentally friendly chemical, and that's why the locusts destroyed 8 to 9 hectares of my land in a week.
The swarms damaged roughly 100,000 cubic meters of agricultural land, nibbling on every edible leaf and making harvest time hard for farmers ahead of the Chuseok holiday, otherwise known as the Korean Thanksgiving. The insects, which range in size from 50 millimeters to 4 centimeters long, were identified as migratory locusts, which can grow up to 6.5 centimeters.
They don't seem to be Chinese grasshoppers. They are migratory locusts that also live in Korea. Usually they are green, but as they changed into group types, they became black.
Experts believe their sudden appearance was due to underground eggs hatching after recent rain. Until the ecosystem stabilizes, scientists warn there is a good chance that the locusts may reappear, and they've called for observation and countermeasures to address the problem. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Shifting gears to a different story now, Russian President Vladimir Putin has called for statehood of the battle-hit southeast of Ukraine. U.S. senators say Washington should provide weapons to Kiev to help it in its fight against pro-Russian rebels. Here's Akani Kim with the latest.
There are increased calls among U.S. politicians to begin arming Ukraine in its fight against what they're calling a Russian invasion. Robert Menendez, the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, said Russian President Vladimir Putin must pay for his, quote, aggression. Speaking to CNN, the Democrat said Washington should provide Ukrainians with weapons to defend themselves. Senator John McCain echoed the sentiment and said Putin is trying to restore the Russian Empire. He called for stronger sanctions on Moscow. The comments out of the U.S. came after Putin called for the statehood of eastern and southern Ukraine.
Substantive, meaningful talks concerning not only technical issues but also related to the issues of the society's political organization and statehood in southeastern Ukraine should begin immediately in order to protect legitimate interests of people living there.
President Putin added that Russia as a state could not stand by and do nothing while its people were being shot at by Ukrainian forces. Russia had previously called for federalization that would give greater rights to eastern Ukraine, but this is the first time Putin has called for statehood. Putin's spokesman later insisted that the statement did not amount to an endorsement of the separatist rebels and that only Kiev can reach an agreement with them. Pro-Russian separatists have been gaining ground on Ukrainian forces in eastern and southern Ukraine. The conflict erupted in April following Russia's annexation of Crimea the previous month. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Thousands of protesters took to the streets of Hong Kong last night after the Chinese Communist Party ruled out open nominations for elections in 2017 that will decide Hong Kong's next chief executive. Pro-democracy activists have vowed to fight for full democracy. Our Park Ji-won reports.
Some 5,000 citizens have taken to the streets of Hong Kong's financial hub, calling for full democracy in the election for its next leader in 2017.
Some officials, who we don't even know how they got chosen in the first place, are telling us Hong Kong people, this place is Beijing's turf. Today I have to tell you this is definitely not true. Hong Kong is Hong Kong people's own turf.
The latest Occupy Central protests, as they are called, were sparked by a ruling out of China's parliament that will allow just 2 to 3 candidates to run for chief executive of Hong Kong in 2017. All of the candidates will first need to gain majority backing from a nominating committee, meaning it will be almost impossible for opposition politicians to even register as candidates.
We have to voice out that we don't agree with the Chinese government's decision. We want democracy. We want to want a fair system to protect the environment of Hong Kong.
Despite the protests, current Hong Kong chief executive is defending Beijing's decision, saying it is a milestone of democratic reform.
Universal suffrage for the CE election through one person, one vote by Hong Kong people is not only a big step forward for Hong Kong, but also a historic milestone.
The Occupy Central protesters see it another way and have promised mass protests against the decision out of Beijing in the weeks and months to come. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And on to some business news. Samsung Group's shipbuilding and engineering units have announced they will merge before the year's end as the nation's top conglomerate speeds up its restructuring drive. Samsung Heavy Industry and Samsung Engineering say they will proceed with the merger with a stock ratio of 2.36 Samsung Heavy Industries shares per 1 Samsung Engineering share. The units say this will provide a synergy effect in designing, purchasing, and managing onshore as well as offshore plants. Now, the company hopes the merger, set to be completed by December 1st, will boost their revenue to a combined $40 billion by the year 2020. That's up 60% from last year. A majority of listed companies in Korea turned in poor performances in the first half, both in terms of sales and profits. Numbers compiled by the Korea Exchange show the sales of nearly 500 listed firms edging down 0.1% on year in the first half of 2014 to $894 billion, with their operating profits dropping nearly 12%. The exchange operator partly attributes the disappointing figures to lower than expected sales of Samsung Electronics Galaxy S5 smartphone model. Samsung logged slightly more than $100 billion in revenue in the first half, down 4% from last year, while its net profit shed 7% year over year. Now, the operating income of the tech giant accounts for about 1/3 of the benchmark Kospi's total.
Korean exports slipped a bit last month from a year earlier. The Trade Ministry says outbound shipments stood at $46.2 billion in August. And that's down 0.1% from the same period last year. The drop was attributed to a fewer number of working days and less output in the auto sector due to summer vacations. Imports went the other direction last month, up 3% to nearly $43 billion, putting the trade surplus for August at more than $3 billion. Korea's finance minister has urged provincial governments to focus on boosting the domestic economy and supporting people's livelihoods. Choi Kyung-hwan's comments came during a meeting with Seoul Mayor Park Won-soon on Monday, with Park pledging to cooperate with the central government to boost growth. The two agreed to organize a joint task force team for a development plan that aims to turn the capital's Hangang River area into a major tourist attraction. The plan came about last month as part of government measures to boost investment. Monday's meeting was the first between the finance minister and Seoul mayor in 8 years. Achieving gender equality in any country is a tall task, but perhaps an even taller one throughout Asia, where cultural norms can make change difficult. To address the gender gap in the region, a 4-day forum began this Monday in Seoul with more than 24 high-profile women taking part. Our Shin Se-min reports.
25 women from 17 countries who are prominent in their fields have gathered in Seoul for the Asia Women Leaders Program, where the priority will be on addressing gender gaps mainly in the Asia-Pacific region. Astrid Tuminas, who is regional director for Microsoft, opened the forum with a keynote address. In it, she said that having more educated women doesn't necessarily translate into more women leaders, particularly in Asia, because of cultural factors. She called on companies and corporations to take the initiative and invest in women as a resource.
Corporations should make the time and space and give the resources because they can't afford not to. Why can't corporations afford not to? First, there is a shortage of human talent, a shortage of human capital. And as the labor force shrinks, you are going to have to draw your talent from the women.
According to a recent report by the Korean Women's Development Institute, which is hosting the forum, Korea's lagging female economic participation rate over the past 13 years has amounted to $192 billion in social costs. And while Korea has invested in trying to narrow the gender gap in the workplace, one of the forum's participants says instituting change goes beyond a set of policies.
Government funds and support systems should not just be announced. They must be implemented and permeate a company's culture. Companies should not just follow these policies. They must also consider the distinctive characteristics of women. An understanding and thoughtful culture should be implemented.
The chairman of Industrial Bank of Korea says guaranteeing a balanced work life for women will eventually become a great asset that will increase the nation's competitiveness globally. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And now let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center for the latest forecast.
Michelle, we are now into September when things should get cooler, but it feels more like summer than fall still.
Right, but our mornings and nights are getting chillier by the day, so you may want to put on an extra layer or two if you're planning on heading out tonight.
So how are things looking tomorrow?
Well, the daytime highs are expected to dip into the low to high 20s due to the rain, but until then, we can expect a hot, cloudy day. Now, heavy rain is also in the forecast starting tomorrow on Jeju Island, and it will expand nationwide with between 50 to 100 millimeters expected depending on where you are. And this rain will last until Thursday, bringing down some temperatures. However, we'll return to the high 20s heading into the weekend. And going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out the Tuesday morning at 21 before reaching up to 28 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will top out both at 26 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops over into the mid-20s, while Dokdo and Mangkunggang is a bit cooler at 23. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you guys.
Thank you for that, Michelle. And that's all we have for you at this hour. Thank you for staying with us. To our viewers in different time zones, do have a wonderful day. This has been Daniel Choy.
And I'm Laah Hyun-kyung, wishing our viewers a pleasant first day of September. Daniel and I will be back same time tomorrow.